Imagine a workplace where up to half of the employees are systematically bullied. Like their entire careers are held hostage by a single powerful manager.
Right. And if they try to report the abuse, they don't just risk getting fired. Some of them actually risk deportation.
Exactly. I mean, if you heard that, you probably assume we were talking about some unregulated, off-the-grid sweatshop somewhere,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
We're not. We are actually talking about the most prestigious, well-funded, Ivy-covered university campuses in the world.
It is a staggering contradiction, honestly. I mean, we are conditioned to view higher education as this ultimate sanctuary for the pursuit of truth and human flourishing and open debate.
Yeah, that's definitely the image they sell you on the brochure.
Yeah, institutions cultivate that image meticulously. But the reality on the ground, behind the closed doors of research labs and seminar rooms, is often vastly different.
And that contradiction is the center of our deep dive today. We're looking at a thoroughly eye-opening article by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover, and it's titled Higher Education's Hidden Crisis. And when I first opened the source material, the raw data completely threw me.
Yeah, the numbers are wild.
The empirical research he cites shows that between 28% and 50% of academic workers will experience workplace bullying during their careers.
And if you place that statistic in the context of almost any other professional sector, it would trigger a massive structural overhaul.
Oh, totally. HR would be swarmed.
Exactly. A corporation with a 50% bullying prevalence would face mass exoduses and just endless litigation. But academia possesses this incredibly unique, almost insulated architecture that allows a crisis of this magnitude to hide in plain sight.
Okay, let's unpack this, because today we are taking you, the listener, through the hidden machinery that makes academic bullying so prevalent.
We really need to pull that architecture apart.
Yeah, we'll look at why the system seems to reward the abusers,
Huh.
how it traps the targets, and critically, how top-tier institutions are finally engineering real, evidence-based solutions to dismantle this toxic setup.
To really understand how this machinery operates, though, we first have to separate actual bullying from the intense intellectual friction that academia naturally requires.
Right.
Because the confusion between those two things, that is the primary camouflage for abusers.
I was actually thinking about this while reading the article. It almost feels like a hazing ritual disguised as a masterclass.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, if I'm defending a dissertation, I expect my committee to rip my arguments to shreds. I mean, that's the whole point of the exercise, right? Academic rigor demands critique.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm trying to figure out where exactly the line is between a tough, demanding mentor and an outright bully. Is it just a matter of tone, like a mentor raising their voice?
Well, the source material is very careful to draw a firm line here, and it goes far beyond just tone. Dr. Westover outlines three core components that cross the boundary into bullying.
Okay, what are they?
First, it's a sustained pattern. So, not a one-off argument in a seminar, but repeated health-harming mistreatment.
Got it.
Second, there is clear intent to diminish, control, or sabotage the individual, rather than to actually improve their scholarship. And third, it leverages a severe power differential.
So it's not just a colleague disagreeing with your methodology. It's a superior explicitly weaponizing their authority.
Precisely. Let's look at the practical examples from the text, because this isn't just getting a paper marked up in red ink. We are talking about public humiliation during departmental meetings, where the explicit goal is to break a researcher's confidence in front of their peers.
Wow.
Yeah, we're talking about principal investigators arbitrarily changing career-defining deadlines at the last minute just to exert control, or demanding extensive unpaid personal labor under the threat of withdrawing professional support.
That's practically extortion.
It is. Or perhaps most damagingly, withholding authorship credit on a major paper where a graduate student did the vast majority of the primary research.
Wait, that last one is essentially stealing the currency of academia, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
your publication record is your entire professional net worth. If someone withholds your credit, they are bankrupting your future.
What's fascinating here is how the broader culture of higher education processes that kind of exploitation. It doesn't just tolerate it. It often normalizes the suffering through a narrative of paying your dues.
Ah, it's the old "I survived the gauntlet, so you should have to survive it too" mentality.
Exactly. It's a classic psychological mechanism called effort justification. People who endured immense abuse to achieve their status often unconsciously defend the system that abused them.
Because admitting the system is flawed would somehow diminish their own achievement.
Yes, the culture transforms structural abuse into a twisted test of intellectual worthiness. If a grad student complains about the public humiliation or the stolen credit, the dominant narrative tells them they simply lack resilience.
They aren't cut out for the life of the mind.
Right. It silences the target by shifting the blame entirely onto their perceived fragility.
Which makes me wonder how the administrative side of the university justifies ignoring it. Because, if someone behaves like this in a Fortune 500 company, HR is going to step in, if only to mitigate the legal risk.
You'd think so, yes.
But in academia, it feels like the abusers have an entirely different rulebook. And reading this research, I keep snagging on the concept of tenure. Wait, isn't tenure supposed to protect unpopular research and academic freedom?
That is the theory, yes.
Right, so you can research controversial topics without a wealthy donor or a politician getting you fired. But in this context, it sounds like it's being used as a superhero shield by the villains to deflect all accountability.
That is the dark side of the tenure system. Its original design was definitely meant to protect ideas, not bad behavior. But in practice, the threshold for revoking tenure is extraordinarily high.
How high are we talking?
Basically impossible in some cases. The processes are opaque, deeply bureaucratic, and often involve peer review by other tenured faculty who might share that exact same dues-paying mentality we just talked about.
Oh, wow. So they protect their own.
Exactly. This creates a state of de facto immunity. An abuser can continue these harmful behaviors for decades because the institution essentially decides that the legal and political nightmare of a tenure revocation fight just isn't worth the trouble.
So the shield meant to protect the research becomes the ultimate armor for the abuser. And while they were walking around untouchable, the people beneath them are completely exposed. Let's look at the grad student advisor dynamic for a second.
It's a very vulnerable position.
Yeah, as I was reading the source, it struck me that this isn't just a normal boss-employee relationship. It's a monopsony-like, a market with only one buyer for your labor.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. The concentration of power is absolute. A doctoral student relies on one single faculty advisor for their funding, their degree progress, their access to lab equipment.
So much everything.
Everything. Their networking opportunities, and the recommendation letters that will entirely dictate whether they ever secure a job in their field. The advisor holds a monopoly on that student's future, often with zero external oversight.
And if that relationship turns abusive, the student has virtually no leverage.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't just quit and go to a competitor across the street like a corporate employee might.
No, they are trapped.
And if that student happens to be an international scholar, that monopsony becomes exponentially more dangerous.
The stakes are incredibly high for international scholars. Their legal status in the country, like their visa sponsorship, is intrinsically tied to their enrollment, which is tied to that specific supervisory relationship.
That's terrifying.
It is. If an international student speaks up about being forced to do unpaid personal labor or having their research stolen, they aren't just risking a bad recommendation, they're risking their visa being revoked.
They're risking deportation and the uprooting of their entire established life.
Exactly. And abusive advisors are acutely aware of this vulnerability, and according to the research, they frequently exploit it.
But the university deans, the department chairs, the provost, they have to see this happening. There's no way a professor terrorizes a lab for a decade and nobody notices. So why do the administrators look the other way?
It boils down to the economics of prestige and a severe scarcity mindset.
Meaning what, exactly?
Well, modern academia is a winner-take-all hierarchy. A university's reputation, and therefore its ability to attract tuition and massive endowments, is driven by high-impact publications, institutional rankings, and huge grant funding.
Okay, follow the money.
Right. If a department has a star researcher or a rainmaker who brings in $5 million a year in federal grants, the administrative incentive is to keep that money flowing at all costs. The aggressive, hyper-competitive, even abusive behavior is quietly rationalized as the necessary cost of doing business at the elite level.
I see. So it's like, sure, they're a tyrant, but they're our tyrant, and they just paid for the new science wing.
That is exactly the logic. The financial incentives directly oppose intervening.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Because if you don't work in a university lab or you aren't currently pursuing a PhD, it's pretty easy to look at this as just some insular academic drama. Why should you care that some tenured professor is being a tyrant to their grad students?
You should care because you rely on the output of those universities every single day of your life. Academic bullying imposes a massive invisible tax on society as a whole.
Right. I mean, think about it from a purely cognitive standpoint. If you were taking a new experimental medication or relying on a new piece of clean energy technology, you want to know that the researchers engineering those solutions were operating at peak cognitive capacity.
Of course.
But if you were being systematically bullied, your brain is flooded with cortisol, you're in a constant state of fight or flight, you literally cannot access the higher order creative problem-solving functions of your prefrontal cortex.
The neurobiology is clear on this, and the empirical data backs it up. The research shows targets of bullying experience severely diminished research productivity and reduced creativity.
It too makes sense.
But the societal cost goes far beyond just slowed productivity. It leads to a catastrophic talent drain. The Council of Graduate Schools estimates a doctoral attrition rate of nearly 50% in some disciplines.
Wait, really? 50%?
50%. Half of the brilliant minds who enter these programs leave before finishing, and the data points to toxic climate factors as a primary driver of those departures.
Which means we are literally hemorrhaging human potential. We are losing out on world-changing breakthroughs because the minds that might have discovered them were driven out of the lab.
And on top of the lost potential, there's a staggering financial and physical cost here, too.
Let's talk about the financial side first.
The institutional financial toll is immense. The source highlights the University of Wisconsin system, which has had to pay multi-million-dollar settlements over faculty harassment cases. That is, public money, taxpayer and tuition money being diverted from education to settle lawsuits that a healthy culture would have prevented.
That is infuriating. And the human toll.
The human toll is far heavier. The research details severe health impacts. Elevated rates of clinical depression, PTSD, suicidal ideation. The chronic stress leads to cardiovascular disease and compromised immune systems. People are literally making themselves physically ill trying to survive their academic programs.
The phrase in the research that really stopped me in my tracks was the erosion of vocational identity.
Yeah, that captures the psychological devastation perfectly. Entering academia for most people isn't just taking a job to pay the bills. It is a profound calling.
You're dedicating your life to an esoteric field because you love the pursuit of knowledge.
Right. And when you are bullied within that space, it attacks your core identity. Targets report losing all passion for the subjects they once loved. They feel fundamentally betrayed by the institutions they revered. They don't just leave a career, they lose a vital piece of who they are.
And we cannot ignore who is disproportionately bearing the brunt of this trauma. The article makes it crystal clear that vulnerable populations, women, people of color, LGBTQ+ individuals, and first-generation students are targeted at significantly higher rates.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the bullying dynamics within the university often mirror and amplify the marginalization happening in broader society. First-generation students, for example, often enter academia without knowing the unwritten rules or having established mentorship networks, making them prime targets for exploitation.
They don't have the institutional armor.
Exactly. Marginalized groups frequently experience a baseline of microaggressions that, in a toxic environment, escalate rapidly into systematic bullying. So this is far more than an interpersonal HR issue. It is a systemic failure that actively perpetuates inequity, driving diverse, necessary voices right out of the academic conversation.
Okay, so we've outlined a pretty grim architecture. We have untouchable abusers, trapped students, administrators blinded by grant money, and a massive loss of diverse talent. But the second half of Dr. Westover's research is where the narrative actually flips.
Yes, there is hope.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if the old advice of just go to HR or tell the department head actually worked, we wouldn't have a 50% prevalence rate. If going to the department head just means complaining to the bully's best friend, what actually works?
Well, traditional complaint mechanisms fail because they route the victim right back through the very power structures that enable the abuse. It lacks confidentiality, guarantees retaliation, and places the entire burden of proof on a person who is already traumatized.
Right. So how are the top institutions re-engineering this? Because the source material details some incredibly concrete structural reforms that are actually moving the needle. Let's start with the reporting structure itself.
The University of British Columbia offers a brilliant model here. They realize that structural independence is the only way to establish trust. So they created an ombudsperson office with total autonomy.
How independent are we talking?
The ombudsperson does not answer to the academic deans or the provost. They answer directly to the university's governing board. They have the authority to launch investigations without asking an administrator for permission, which completely removes the conflict of interest where a dean might want to protect a high-earning researcher.
Oh, that's smart. It bypasses the gatekeepers entirely. And I was really intrigued by the University of Michigan's approach to the reporting process itself, with their tiered options.
Michigan recognized that forcing a victim immediately into a high-stakes, formal investigation often prevents them from reporting at all. So they implemented a tiered system. You can report anonymously, which helps the university aggregate data and identify hotspots without exposing the victim.
Which is huge for people worried about retaliation.
Exactly. You can also seek informal consultation to get advice on navigating a situation. Or you can trigger a formal investigation. Parallel to this, the University of California implemented a centralized tracking system. Historically, a toxic professor could just move to a different campus or department and start fresh. Now, their behavioral record follows them.
The institution connects the dots before a pattern becomes a full-blown crisis. I love that. But reporting still happens after the damage is done. The holy grail here is stopping the behavior in the moment. Usually this bullying happens in front of an audience, right? Like in a lab or a faculty meeting where everyone else just stares at their shoes.
Bystander silence is the mechanism that validates the bully. It leverages the diffusion of responsibility. Everyone assumes someone else will intervene, so no one does. To counter this, MIT adapted a bystander intervention program originally developed for sexual assault prevention, and they tailored it specifically to academic power dynamics.
Okay, but how does that actually play out in a high-pressure faculty meeting?
Yeah.
You can't exactly stand up and scream, "Stop bullying them," at a senior professor who holds your funding in their hands.
That's the beauty of the MIT model. It doesn't require a grand, confrontational act of heroism. It teaches practical, low-stakes interventions designed to break the cognitive freeze of the room. It gives bystanders actual scripts.
Like what?
If a professor is humiliating a junior researcher, a bystander might simply say, "That comment seems overly personal, let's get back to the methodology." Or they might use redirection, physically changing the subject or calling for a quick break.
That comment seems overly personal.
Oh.
It's so simple, but it completely disrupts the momentum of the attack.
Exactly. It signals to the room that the behavior is not the accepted norm. When bystander intervention becomes a standard expectation rather than a rare act of bravery, the bully rapidly loses their social power.
But ultimately, you can have all the reporting lines and bystander scripts in the world, and it won't matter if leadership doesn't enforce consequences. Which brings me to Stanford's intervention. Stanford went straight for the department chairs. But I have a genuine question about this.
Go for it.
Stanford is a research juggernaut. If a department chair is bringing in $10 million in federal grants, you're telling me Stanford will actually risk firing them or demoting them just because their grad students gave them a bad climate review? How does the university justify that math?
It is a radical shift in how universities calculate liability. Stanford realized that evaluating chairs solely on research output and grant money was creating massive hidden long-term costs, lawsuits, turnover, reputational damage. So they revised the evaluation metrics to include mandatory 360-degree feedback.
Meaning everyone gets a say.
Yes. Subordinates, grad students, postdocs, junior faculty now provide confidential, weighted feedback on their chair's ability to maintain psychological safety and equitably distribute resources.
That completely flips the behavioral economics of the department.
It does. When your subordinates hold a tangible fraction of your administrative career in their hands, your dominant strategy has to shift from exploitation to collaboration. You can lose your chairmanship and the power that comes with it, regardless of your grant total.
Wow. Okay, let's address the most trapped demographic we talked about earlier. The grad student locked in a monopsony with a single abusive advisor. How are institutions breaking that monopoly?
By structurally distributing the power. The University of Michigan's Rackham Graduate School offers the prime example here. They abolished the single advisor model for incoming students. Instead, they implemented mandatory committee oversight starting in year one. You immediately have multiple faculty members invested in your progress, observing the dynamic.
So the bully can't isolate you.
Precisely. But more importantly, Michigan created formal, frictionless procedures that allow a student to change advisors for any reason without losing their funding or extending their timeline to graduation.
Oh, that's brilliant.
They entirely severed the financial coercion from the academic relationship. If a mentorship turns toxic, the student can pull the ripcord, transfer to a new advisor, and their career remains intact.
That is the ultimate release valve. Yeah. But, reading through all these policies, the ombudsman, the 360 reviews, the distributed power, it becomes clear that policies alone aren't enough.
Mm.
There has to be a fundamental rewiring of the institutional culture.
And culture is notoriously the hardest thing to change because you are trying to rewrite decades of neuroassociations within an institution. The University of Toronto provides a fascinating case study here. They didn't just issue a new policy, they launched a sustained 5-year initiative to explicitly reframe the definition of academic rigor.
So changing what paying your dues actually means.
Exactly. Leadership, from the president down to the deans, had to consistently message that demanding excellence and interpersonal cruelty are not synonymous.
You can maintain elite standards without being a tyrant. Who knew?
Right. They drove home the point that psychological safety doesn't dilute excellence. It is the prerequisite for it. And they backed it up by rewarding positive cultural exemplars. If a professor was known as an exceptional mentor who fostered an inclusive, safe lab environment that actively strengthened their promotion and tenure narrative.
Putting their money where their mouth is.
Exactly. Over those 5 years, by aligning their institutional rewards with their stated values, Toronto saw a measurable, dramatic reduction in the tolerance for demeaning behavior.
So looking at the entire landscape of this research, the core insight is that academic bullying is not the result of a few anomalous bad apples. It is a systemic design flaw. It thrives on an architecture of extreme power imbalances, unchecked tenure, a scarcity mindset, and a romanticized mythology of suffering for your art. But, as we've seen from MIT to Stanford to Michigan, this architecture is not an unchangeable law of nature.
Definitely not.
When institutions deliberately distribute authority, sever financial coercion from mentorship, and prioritize psychological safety, the culture profoundly transforms.
And the implications of that transformation reach far beyond the walls of the university.
Absolutely. For you listening, whether you are managing a team in a corporate boardroom, running a startup, or leading a department in a hospital, the mechanics we've explored today apply directly to you. Creating psychological safety isn't some soft academic luxury. It is the bedrock of high performance, deep innovation, and talent retention in any industry. Your team simply cannot innovate if their primary cognitive load is dedicated to navigating fear.
This raises an important question, something for everyone to mull over. Think about the sheer volume of human knowledge we rely on today. The medical treatments, the engineering marvels, the technological leaps we just take for granted. Now ask yourself, how many groundbreaking medical discoveries, how many technological leaps or brilliant works of literature have we collectively lost because a brilliant mind was quietly bullied out of the laboratory or the library before they could share their gift with the world?
That is a haunting thought to leave on. We build these towering institutions as sanctuaries for truth and discovery, but we must rigorously examine who the architecture is quietly locking out. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden crisis of higher education. Keep questioning the structures around you, keep looking out for one another, and we will catch you next time.